We are in section P6. We have one more thing to talk about in this section relating to points and graphs and the coordinate system and all that, and that is the midpoint formula. If you've got 2 points, how do you find the point that's halfway in between them, the midpoint of the line segment that connects them? So here is the midpoint formula. So the midpoint is a point, which means it's got an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. So here what we're looking for is not just a number, but it's a pair of numbers giving coordinates of that midpoint. So here's how that's calculated. You got your 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. And the midpoint has an x-coordinate that comes from x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And the y-coordinate of the midpoint is y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So really what you're doing here is it's like you're averaging together the x-coordinate to get the x that's halfway between those, and you're averaging together the y-coordinates to get the y that's halfway between those, to get the point that's halfway between the original 2 points. So going back to our example points here, halfway between these 2 blue points, 1, 2, and 9, 8, if we apply the midpoint formula there, 1 plus 9, x-coordinate plus x-coordinate, gives us 10, and we divide that by 2 and get 5. So halfway between 1 and 9 is 5. Now look at the y-coordinates. 2 plus 8 happens to also be 10, and then 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we've got a y-coordinate of 5. Halfway between where y is 2 and where y is 8 is the point where y is 5. So our midpoint is right here at 5, 5. Okay, let's try the 2 red points. What's the point halfway between those, the midpoint there? Take the x-coordinates, -3 plus -5, add them together to get -8, and divide by 2 to get -4. So halfway between -3 and -5 would be -4. Now look at the y-coordinates. We've got a +1 plus a -4. Those add up to -3, and then -3 divided by 2 would be, well, you can write it as -3 over 2, that is -3 halves, but that would also be -1.5 or -1.5. So the midpoint is where x is -4 and where y is -1.5, halfway between -1 and -2. What about the midpoint of this green line segment, halfway between -1 and 0 and +7, 0? Can you see where that would be? Well, if we apply the midpoint formula there, for the x-coordinate we get -1 plus 7, which is 6, divided by 2, which is 3. And for the y-coordinate we get 0 plus 0, which is 0, divided by 2, which is 0. Remember, 0 divided by anything is 0. So our midpoint is 3, 0. If we start at -1, 0, and head on over to 7, 0, we'll be at the halfway point when we hit 3, 0. So now let's revisit our soccer players here. Remember I said we'd be able to calculate exactly how far each one of those guys is from the ball, so we can tell for sure who's closer. So this guy here is at the point 8, -2. Meanwhile, the soccer ball is over here at -1, -5. So if we calculate the distance between 8, -2 and -1, -5, remember how that works. X-coordinate minus x-coordinate squared. That's -1 minus 8, or -9 squared, gives us 81. Plus y-coordinate minus y-coordinate squared is -5 minus -2. That would be the same as negative 5 plus a positive 2, so negative 3, and when you square that, you get 9. Then 81 plus 9 is 90, and when we take the square root of 90, when you take the square root of 90, you get approximately 9.49. Even without a calculator, I could have told you it was somewhere between 9 and 10. The square root of 90 is bigger than the square root of 81, which would just be 9 exactly, and it's smaller than the square root of 100, which would be 10. So somewhere in between, we've got the square root of 90, and my calculator tells me it's about 9.49. So this guy's about 9.49 squares away from the ball. Meanwhile, what about this guy? He's at the point negative 2, 5. And we want to find how far that is from the soccer ball at negative 1, negative 5. So x coordinate minus x coordinate, negative 1 minus negative 2 would be 1. Square that, you get 1. Y coordinate minus y coordinate would be negative 5 minus 5, which is negative 10. Square that, you get 100. And 1 plus 100 is 101, 101. Take the square root of that, and it's about 10.05. It's a little bigger than the square root of 100, which would be 10 exactly. So this guy is 9.49 squares away from the ball. This guy is a little more than 10.05 squares away. So this guy's closer. If they both start running at the same time and they both run at the same speed, this guy's going to get there first. Okay, now what if we want to make it fair and put the ball so it's the same distance away from both soccer players? In fact, why don't we just move it right in the middle between them? Where would that put it if we want the soccer ball to be right in between these two guys? Well, for that, we would use the midpoint formula. We would be looking for the midpoint halfway between 8, negative 2 and negative 2, 5. So the x-coordinate of that point would be negative 2, 8, or negative 2 plus 8, which is 6, divided by 2, which is 3. Y-coordinate would be 5 plus negative 2, which is 3, divided by 2, which is 1.5, or 1.5, or 3 halves. So that puts the soccer ball at the point where x is 3 and y is halfway between 1 and 2, 1.5.